He seized her arm without warning, yanked her away from the path, and pushed her into the shadows. The girl let out one sharp cry before falling silent, as though she already understood that noise brought nothing but more pain. A thick haze of dust drifted through the blazing Kansas summer, not far from Dodge City, where the Arkansas River ran shallow in the dry months. From the outside, the scene looked damning. A weathered old rancher hauling a young woman toward a shed, his grip iron tight, his expression carved from stone. Any passing rider would have drawn the worst conclusion, and they would not have been far wrong to do so. Inside the dim shade, her legs buckled beneath her. She collapsed against the wall, trembling violently, gasping for breath. She tried to crawl, palms dragging across cracked earth, whispering the same word over and over. No, no, no. Silas Mercer pulled the door shut behind him. The sound hit like a gavel. Heavy. Absolute. Outside, a stranger might have sworn he had just witnessed something irredeemable. She looked up at him from the floor. 19 years old, sunburned and filthy, with bruises she had done her best to hide. Her voice finally tore free, ragged from the heat. "Don't send me back," she said. Then louder. "Please, don't send me back there." The blood left Silas's face all at once. Not slowly, not with thought. It simply drained away. He had witnessed fear before. Men facing the gallows. Soldiers bleeding out on parched ground. But this was different. This was the kind of fear that only grows in a person who knows precisely how their story ends. Silas had buried a wife and a son years back, taken by cholera before he could do a thing to stop it. He had made himself a quiet vow in that churchyard. He would not stand still while another young life was extinguished in front of him. She grabbed at his coat with both hands, fingers shaking, nails broken down to the skin. She swore she had not stolen anything. Swore she had never lied. Begged him to believe her. He told her to breathe. His voice was calm, measured. But she was not ready to hear calm yet. Her eyes kept darting to the door like she expected it to splinter open at any second. That was when he noticed the rope burns on her wrists, old wounds that had been rubbed raw again recently. That was when he saw how her whole body flinched every time he shifted his hands. And that was when something settled into him, low and slow and resolute. He spotted a folded paper tucked deep inside the hemline of her skirt, red wax pressed firm into the fold, the kind of seal that belonged to someone accustomed to authority. This was no personal letter. It had the weight of a document, the kind that could unravel powerful men if the right eyes ever landed on it. Land dealings that did not add up. Payments made to silence the law. And pressed into the wax, one clean mark, a W. Whitmore. Silas straightened slowly, jaw set, gaze shifting past her toward whatever waited on the other side of that door. If he opened it and handed her over, she would not see another sunrise. He knew that with the same certainty he knew weather and horses and hard country, so he bolted the door instead. Broke the simplest rule he lived by, and chose her life over his own quiet. He did not press her for the full story right away. A man his age understood better than that. You let the shaking settle first. You wait for the words that come on their own. He unstopped his canteen and set it on the dirt beside her. She drank like a woman who had not tasted water in days, both hands wrapped around it. Piece by piece the story came. Not in order. Not clean. But enough. Her name was Eliza May Carter. She had worked as a housegirl for the Whitmore family in Dodge City. And the Whitmores were the kind of name that made an entire town develop a sudden interest in looking elsewhere. She said it like the word itself tasted wrong. She kept the worst details to herself. She did not need to speak them. The way her hands tightened around the canteen said enough. The way her voice pulled tight whenever she mentioned the son, Clayton Whitmore Jr., a young man raised on money and the certainty that nothing in the world was beyond his reach. Eliza said she had tried to leave. They told her that was not an option. She said she had tried to speak up. They explained what would happen if she did. When she finally ran, she took nothing except what she wore in that folded paper. She did not know what was written in it. She only knew that the moment those men realized it was gone, they stopped pretending they had ever intended to let her go. Silas stood with his back against the wall, arms folded, eyes on the ground. Every rancher within riding distance of Dodge City knew the Whitmore name. Cattle, land, and just the right friends and just the right offices. If a girl like Eliza disappeared, the town would believe whatever version of events the Whitmores cared to offer. A sound drifted in from outside. Hooves, measured and deliberate. Silas eased the door open just wide enough to look. Two riders sat near the fence line, trail dust thick on their coats, hats pulled low against the sun. One of them wore a smile like a man who had already decided how the afternoon would end. They were not shouting. They were not rushing. That was the part that made his stomach drop. He pulled the door shut again, face unreadable, mind already working. The Whitmores had known she was close. Someone on the trail had spotted her stumbling, and word had traveled faster than any horse he owned. They were already too near. He looked down at Eliza, still pressed against the wall, eyes wide and watching. If they stayed, she would be taken. If they ran, the noise would only bring more men. And then it struck him with the quiet force of something he should have seen sooner. This was no longer about sheltering a frightened girl from a bad situation. This was about how far the Whitmores were prepared to go to make certain she never drew breath in a courtroom. Silas did not wait for a knock at the door. He saddled up fast, hands steady, thoughts already laid out 3 moves ahead. He told Eliza they were moving, and not toward Dodge City. Not yet. Fort Dodge lay to the west. Close enough to reach before dark if the trail held. Soldiers. A telegraph line. Places where even the Whitmore name had to wait its turn. They did not make it far before the trap closed around them. Silas felt it in the silence before he saw it. Near a bend in the Arkansas, riders materialized out of the heat like they had been carved from the air itself. No warning shots. No raised voices. They did not want her dead in the open country. They wanted her delivered back to town so they could dress it up as a lawful arrest. One man stepped forward, his tone almost courteous. He said Eliza's name like he was doing her a kindness by knowing it. Silas stepped in front of her, then hands landed where they had no business being. The first blow came without ceremony. Not elegant, just brutal. Dust flying, breath knocked loose, boots skidding across baked earth, and Silas absorbing it all without making a sound. He fought like a man who understood he was outnumbered but had already decided that surrendering was not something he was built for. He did not shout. He grunted, absorbed the punishment, and kept his feet moving. He put one man down. He staggered a second. Then someone grabbed Eliza from behind. She did not scream. She went still. Silas caught a face in the crowd that he recognized. Evan Briggs, a man he had once considered trustworthy, a man who still carried a debt to Silas even if he had spent years pretending otherwise. Their eyes found each other for a fraction too long. Briggs hesitated. A single breath of uncertainty. It was not enough. Eliza was lifted onto a horse and swallowed by the dust. By the time Silas pulled himself to his feet, she was gone. All that remained was the sound of insects and his own labored breathing. He tested his ribs with one careful inhale, spat grit from his teeth, and climbed back into the saddle. He did not turn toward the ranch. He turned west, toward Fort Dodge, and he did not slow down once. Fort Dodge did not take long to convince. Deputy Marshal Tom Keller happened to be there on a prisoner run, and Silas reached him before he could ride back east. A battered man with fury burning behind his eyes has a way of commanding a room. By late afternoon, the two of them were riding hard toward Dodge City. Men watched from doorways and awnings, pretending to be indifferent. Word had already made the rounds ahead of them. The Whitmores were telling anyone who would listen that a runaway girl had stolen from the household. Keller was direct about the problem. If they went in loud with accusations, the town would seal itself shut. Whitmore money had built too much of it. So they waited. The Long Branch filled as the sun sank and lamplight took over from daylight. That was where men said things they believed were safe to say. Clayton Whitmore Jr. walked in like he had inherited the building. Clean shirt, comfortable grin. Not a trace of whatever he had nearly done to a girl who could not protect herself. Silas watched him from across the room, hands wrapped around a glass he never touched. He kept his expression flat. Anger would have alerted Clayton. Patience was the sharper weapon. When Clayton passed close enough, Silas spoke quietly, just loud enough to reach him. He said the girl was alive. He said she still had something worth reading. Clayton stopped. Just for a moment. The paper was destroyed, he said, clipped and fast before he realized what he had handed over. Then he caught himself and smoothed the smile back into place because his father owned enough of this town's truth to make most things disappear. Most men in the room missed it entirely. Keller did not. Silas did not, and from the far end of the bar, Evan Briggs stood without drinking, watching with an expression that had shifted into something heavier than regret. He had hired on to chase down a frightened girl. Now he was listening to something that could not be unheard. By the time Clayton slipped out the door, the air in Dodge City felt different, tighter, like the sky before a storm that does not give warning. Keller leaned close and spoke plainly. Whitmore would not risk another public stumble. If the girl was still breathing, they would make certain she stopped before morning, and they would do it somewhere without witnesses. Silas was already heading for the door before Keller finished the sentence. They found the tracks near the Arkansas River, pressed deep into mud where men believed moving water erased things permanently. Silas rode without speaking. At his age, you understood which moments called for silence. They arrived at the bank just before the reeds swallowed the last of the daylight. Clayton Whitmore Jr. stood there with his composure cracked, the easy confidence evaporated. The girl stood a few steps apart, wrists bound again, eyes level in the manner of someone who had already survived more than most people could imagine. The confrontation did not stretch out long. Clayton talked about his father's connections in Topeka. He talked about which marshals in Kansas valued their careers. He explained that no one in this state would move against a Whitmore and expect to keep their position. Silas did not answer him. He simply walked forward on worn boots across wet grass and stood between Clayton and the girl, immovable, like something planted. Evan Briggs broke then. He said what he had witnessed. He named who had issued the orders. He said quietly and finally that he was finished pretending he could not tell the difference between right and wrong. That was sufficient. By the time the sun came up over Dodge City, there would be a different story moving through the streets. One that could not be pinned on a frightened girl who had done nothing but survive. Eliza sat by the river as the sky turned pale and wide. She breathed slowly, openly, for the first time in days that felt like years. Silas offered her work. Not out of pity. A fair wage. A place with rules that cut both directions. A door she controlled. She accepted. Not because she was obligated to him. Because she chose to. Some men believe that rules exist to protect the people who write them. Others figure out, late if they are lucky, that a rule is only